Hello. Hello, I'm Nicholas Papazakaras. I'm the director of the Institute of Historical Research. And I would like to welcome you to the 2024 Autumn Lecture in Classics, organized by our institute, by the British School at Athens, represented at the highest level tonight by its director, Professor Rebecca Sweetman, and the Institute of Classical Studies at the University of London, also represented at the highest level by its director, Professor Catherine Harlow, who has traveled all the way here from London. I ask for the understanding of our international audience as I will switch to modern Greek for a brief introduction, but following my short remarks, the remainder of this evening's intellectual festivities will proceed in English. Κυρίες και κύριοι, αγαπητές και αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, εκ μέρους του Ινστιτούτου Ιστορικών Ερευνών του Εθνικού Ιδρύματος Ερευνών, σας καλωσορίζω στην ετήσια φθινοπωρινή διάλεξη κλασικών σπουδών που συνδιοργανώνουν ο τομέας ελληνικής και ρωμαϊκής αρχαιότητας του Ινστιτούτου μας, η Βρετανική Σχολή Αθηνών και το Ινστιτούτο Κλασικών Σπουδών του Πανεπιστημίου του Λονδίνου. Όσοι παρακολουθήσατε την περσινή διάλεξη, ίσως θυμάστε την αναφορά μου στο πλαίσιο συνεργασίας των εμπλεκόμενων φορέων, το οποίο στηρίζεται στην προγραμματικώς εκπεφρασμένη επιθυμία τους να προωθήσουν στο ύψιστο δυνατό επίπεδο τον επιστημονικό διάλογο μεταξύ Ελλάδας και Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου στον τομέα των αρχαιογνωστικών σπουδών, στην αρχαιολογία, την αρχαία ιστορία και την κλασική φιλολογία. Είναι πεποίθησή μου ότι οι συνεργασίες όπως αυτή μεταξύ των τριών συμβαλωμένων φορέων αντιμετωπίζουν ευχερώς το διωγγούμενο πρόβλημα της πολυδιάσπασης των επιστημονικών δράσεων και ευνοούν ως εκ τούτου την αποτελεσματικότερη διάχυση της επιστημονικής γνώσης σε μεγάλα ακροατήρια. Σε κάθε περίπτωση, οι φθινοπωρινές διαλέξεις κλασικών σπουδών ξεκίνησαν το 2015 και γρήγορα κατέστησαν μία από τις κορυφαίες αρχαιογνωστικές εκδηλώσεις στη χώρα μας. Η απόψινή εκδήλωση δεν αποτελεί εξαίρεση, έχει όμως και μια ιδιομορφία. Είναι και η τελευταία εκδήλωση του Ινστιτούτου Ιστορικών Ερευνών στο ιστορικό αμφιθέατρο Leonidas Zervas, προτού αυτού κλείσει εντός λίγων ημερών για ριζική ανακαίνιση, η οποία και αναμένεται να διαρκήσει πάνω από χρόνο, όταν με το καλό επιστρέψουμε για την επόμενη φθινοπωρινή διάλεξη, προσδοκούμε θα βρεθούμε σε ένα ανανεωμένο, μεταμορφωμένο προς το καλύτερο αμφιθέατρο. Αλλά είμαι βέβαιος ότι όλοι σας αναμένετε να ξεκινήσει όσο το δυνατόν γρηγορότερα το επιστημονικό τμήμα της απόψινής συνάντησης, αφού σας θυμίσω ότι μετά την ομιλία θα ακολουθήσει μια μικρή δεξίωση προς τιμήν της προσκεκλημένης μας. Προσκαλέσω τώρα την Διευθύντρια της Βρετανικής Σχολής, Rebecca Sweetman, να δώσει αυτή μια μικρή ομιλία. So I would like to invite Rebecca Sweetman to the podium. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikos, for that. And thank you all for coming on behalf of the BSA and the Institute of Classical Studies. We would like to thank Nikos and Mirina and the whole team from the Greek and Roman section here at the Institute for the very happy collaboration. And it is actually one of the highlights of my year, not just to be able to bring over esteemed colleagues like Judy and hear about their latest work, but also rather selfishly, it gives me an opportunity to see Mirina and to see Catherine and catch up on more social things too. So it's a real treat. And actually, it does feel like a kind of renewal of this agreement, because this is actually the second one since COVID. And really, it's a lovely treat to be able to bring scholars like Judy across. And that's all I want to say. And now I'm going to let Mirina introduce Judy. So thank you all very much. And thank you to Nikos and the team.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, good evening. I'm very glad to see so many of you here tonight for this year's Autumn Lecture in Classics, to be delivered by one of the most prominent classical archaeologists of our time, the recipient of an astonishing array of prestigious academic honors and awards. When one delves into the doings and writings of Judith Barringer, one is overwhelmed by the series of esteemed academic establishments and institutions in Europe and the USA, where she has studied, taught, lectured, and researched. By the congregation of distinguished scholars who have shaped the field of classics, with whom she has collaborated, and with whom her work has been and continues to be in vibrant and fruitful dialogue. And by being confronted with some of the most iconic landmarks, sites, monuments, and more broadly, cultural products of ancient Greece. Much of what we today consider the natural way to go about questioning and understanding our material is owed to the work of eminent scholars such as Judith Barringer. Visual semiotics, narrative structures, physical, political, religious, social, performative, private or public contexts, malleability of meaning, sexuality and gender roles, placing the ancient viewers, their identity, perception, and response to the visual image at the center of the investigation. As she succinctly puts it in her study on the hunt in ancient Greece, one of my favorite reads from cover to cover in my postgraduate days, Greek art is a cultural construct made up of selective, manipulated images that employ their own language to reflect societal values and beliefs. A major facet of Judith Barringer's work has been on iconology, and in particular on the intricate relationship and interaction between the written and the visual, between literary sources and images, between myth, religion, ritual, and art, focusing on vase painting and sculpture, but in reality, looking at the whole wide range of media and different kinds of image carriers that classical antiquity has generously bequeathed to us. In her treatment of Greek art, in her many articles and books, Judith Barringer's scope emerges broad, brave, and bold, offering the reader the sheer pleasure of immersing oneself in the vast material record and its comparative interpretation, unafraid to borrow methodologies from other disciplines and to cross the boundaries of conventional fields, as the title of a volume which she co-edited with the legendary late François Lissarag suggests, Images at the Crossroads, Media and Meaning in Greek Art. With her mind set on the long term and her gaze open to the big picture, Judith Barringer has steadfastly chosen to reflect on celebrated and challenging historical and archaeological landscapes and monumental complexes that constitute the very core of what was or what is historically perceived to have been ancient Greece, such as the Athenian Acropolis and the Athenian Agora, Delos or Delphi, and of course Olympia, to which she has devoted a profound study entitled Olympia, A Cultural History, published in 2021 by Princeton University Press, in which she examined the development of the site from around 600 BC to 393 AD, when pagan cult practices were officially abolished by Theodosius. And as it happens, when one plunges into the complex questions raised by sites such as Olympia, this study actually sowed the seeds and foreshadowed two subsequent major research projects to which our invited speaker has more recently turned her intellect. The first concerns logistics in Greek sanctuaries, a topic further explored in an international conference held in Athens in 2018, co-organized with Gunnar Lektoth and David Scahill, the proceedings of which are going to be published soon and will bring to the fore a series of practical yet vital aspects of running a cult place. Transport, accommodation, food and drink consumption, animal care, maintenance, water management and hygiene, sacrifice and waste management are among the questions addressed with the aim of reviving the human experience of visiting the gods in an ancient Greek sanctuary. The second major research project, about which we will be hearing more tonight, entitled Seeking the Divine in a Faraway Place, Western Greeks and Sanctuaries Abroad, is concerned with the relationship of the Greek colonies of South Italy and Sicily to sanctuaries on the Greek mainland, the Aegean Islands, and in Asia Minor from the 7th to the 1st century BC. Like her beloved Nereids, protectresses of seafarers and benevolent attendants of individuals in critical transitions, our speaker promises to take us on a journey from west to east, across the waters of the Mediterranean, and to guide us safely through from the sea of the unknown to islands of hard-won knowledge. Without further ado, Professor Barringer. will you please take the floor?
Ευχαριστώ, Mirina. After such a flattering and kind and generous introduction, I'm almost afraid to speak. Κυρίες, καλό βράδυ. Είμαι πολύ ευχαριστημένη που είμαι εδώ. And I would like to extend my thanks to Mirina Kalitsi of the National Hellenic Research Foundation, Rebecca Sweetman of the British School at Athens, and Catherine Harlow of the Institute of Classical Studies. Can everybody hear me now? It's okay? Okay. And I would especially like to thank the British School and Rebecca for their kind hospitality while I'm here in Athens. This talk has a lot of maps in it, and I've tried to circle the places on the maps that I'm speaking about, but there comes a point where you're seeing some of the same places again and again, so I stopped circling because I got tired of circling, and you probably don't want to look for the circles constantly. So anyway, without further ado. Colonization westward from ancient Greece in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE constitutes one of the most significant population movements in the ancient world. When Greek settlers mixed with the pre-existing populations in South Italy and Sicily, they initially retained religious practices and customs from the home city, including the building of temples in their new homeland, such as that of Apollo in Syracuse, and here you see Syracuse on the map, and a view of the Temple of Apollo. But over time, and fairly quickly in some cases, colonial customs diverged from those of the mother city. Yet colonial cities and individuals within them expended effort and money, sometimes enormous quantities of both, to make offerings in sanctuaries very far from their own homes. In some cases, the deities were the same as those worshipped at nearby sanctuaries. Yet the dedication was destined for a sanctuary on the mainland of Greece, the Aegean Islands, or Asia Minor, locations that sometimes required long periods of travel to reach. And these were not sanctuaries in the mother cities. Why? What was the purpose of these contacts with distant homeland sanctuaries, particularly centuries after the colonists had settled into their new apoikiai, their colonies, where they had established their own well-appointed religious sites? Why were some sanctuaries abroad favored, while others, even major sanctuaries, such as that of the great gods on Samothrace, did not receive this level of attention? In the case of dedications from cities, was there something, for example, a form of government, that made a Western city more likely to donate to a sanctuary abroad? The denominated tyrants of Sicily, for example, left numerous monuments at Delphi and Olympia, but the Spartan colony of ancient Taras, first an aristocracy and then a democracy, was also an energetic patron of dedications at Delphi. Such questions lie at the heart of my current research project, which focuses on colonies in Magna Graecia and their relationship to Greek sanctuaries on the mainland, Aegean Islands, and Asia Minor from the 7th to the 1st centuries BCE. While scholars have given a great deal of attention to the colonial cities themselves, their foundations, interrelationships, and conflicts with the Phoenicians in Western Sicily, they have scarcely considered the relationship of colonial Greeks with religious sanctuaries back home, why these ties continued centuries after the foundation of the original colonies, what was gained by the Western Greeks and or the sanctuaries, or how Western Greeks perceive themselves in relationship to other Greeks as expressed in the key gathering places of Hellenes. Using archaeological material, inscriptions, and ancient written sources combined with network theory, my work considers the benefits accrued to both Western Greek donors and the sanctuaries they patronized. And my project also aims to illuminate colonial Western notions of ethnicity, self-perception, and self-representation. The few scholars who have addressed these issues focus on pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, and suggests that the dedications were efforts to be perceived as Greek, as if Western Greeks were in danger of being forgotten, a view that originates from a mainland perspective, the center where the real Greeks lived. This reasoning is not convincing. The dedications made by Western Greeks at Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries and elsewhere were some of the most exorbitant, eye-catching, and sumptuous offerings. This is certainly true of the Sicilian tyrants of the late 6th and 5th centuries BCE, who inaugurated the practice of dedicating life-size bronze equestrian groups as athletic victory monuments in the early classical period. One example is the famed charioteer at Delphi. So here's the Sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi and the charioteer on the left, and possible reconstructions of this over life-size bronze group that included a quadriga and other figures. Far from being an attempt to compensate for being out of the center of things, the costs and scale of these undertakings, the largest athletic monuments at the time, speak to enormous egos, demonstrating that the donors were wealthy, powerful, influential, independent, and very much in the center of the world. So let's turn to the evidence. Western Greek colonies, rulers and citizens, made their mark at Delphi and Olympia, where they competed in the games, won athletic victories memorialized in bronze statues, dedicated bronze tripods, commissioned victory odes, and made other offerings of many kinds. While most bronze statues and tripods do not survive, many of the inscribed bases on which they once stood are extant. Western Greek cities constructed and dedicated treasury buildings at Delphi and Olympia, which held numerous costly gifts from Western cities and other donors, according to Pausanias and other ancient writers. Western Greek cities also erected military victory monuments at sanctuaries abroad and made offerings of other kinds, including gold, silver, and ivory, as well as cash. The strong tie between Western Greek colonies and Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries is also evidenced by athletic victors' lists at the Pan-Hellenic Games. A high proportion of winners derived from Western cities in the 7th to 5th centuries BCE. Croton, indicated here, is especially noteworthy, with 21 Olympic wins between 672 and 484 BCE. Let's begin with Olympia. Undoubtedly, proximity and prominence contributed to Olympia's special tie with the West. Olympia was certainly the largest and most significant sanctuary closest to Magna Graecia. I want to just point out something while we have this image on the screen here. Does this show up? Yeah, here, okay. Here are the treasuries, which I'm just about to talk about. Just here, 5, possibly 6 of these 12 treasuries dedicated at Olympia were given by Western Greek polis. And here you see the plan of the treasuries and the Roman numerals and the indications of who dedicated them. And this can be corresponded to on the chart. You can compare the two. While all the Olympia treasuries have Doric architecture, their terracotta sculptural decoration, and often their roofs, were created in a distinct manner employed in the patron city. Numerous physical offerings of other kinds, such as images of Zeus, also attest to the patronage of Western Greeks. War booty, including weapons and armor taken from other Western Greeks and Etruscans, are especially striking. Here we see an inscribed bronze shield dedicated by Zancle, modern-day Messina, from their victory over Rhegion. And in the lower right-hand corner, you can see a map with the city of Mylae indicated on it. And I show you that here because I want to show you this helmet on the left, which was taken from Mylae and dedicated by Messina. We also have an Etruscan helmet dedicated at Olympia by Hieron I of Syracuse on the right. As already mentioned, the denominated rulers of Syracuse offered bronze equestrian monuments to mark their success in the Olympic Games. And here we have the remaining inscribed base from Jalon's bronze equestrian monument at Olympia, although the base beneath it here does not belong. We also have two herald staffs that were dedicated by the Syracusans. In addition to these official gifts, and I should mention there's plenty more armor I'm not showing you, and weapons dedicated by Italians in South Italy and Sicily. In addition to these official gifts, we also have private offerings at Olympia. Some are from prominent individuals in Western Greece, such as Mykithos, the 5th century tyrant of Rhegion. He erected a multi-figure sculptural group as a thank offering for his son's recovery from an illness. And you can see that base here on the plan just north of the Temple of Zeus, so a very prominent location. Phrynon of Leontini seems to have been one of several donors who erected a colossal statue of Zeus 7 cubits high, which was later divided and reused. Oh, sorry, excuse me. The statue wasn't divided and reused. He dedicated this colossal statue, I skipped a line, and he also set up a pillar in the mid-5th century BCE, which was later divided and reused around the archaic altar of Artemis. So on the plan, you see the archaic altar here, and over here we see the altar of Artemis, and these projections, these vertical projections, are this pillar that was dismantled and reused around the altar of Artemis. Why they're there is not entirely clear. All those scholars hypothesize that perhaps they were there to protect the altar from wheeled traffic, because the altar is very, very small and very low to the ground. Other individuals are otherwise unknown to us. One, Hippotion of Taras, dedicated statues of Heracles and the Nemean lion at Olympia in the early 4th century BC, as we know from Pausanias and from the inscribed base. There is a concentration of such Western Greek monuments at Olympia from the late 6th to 4th centuries BCE. But there are other later instances, such as an honorific statue for Hieron II, set up by the city of Tauromenion, modern Taormina, in the second half of the 3rd century BCE. Inscribed agreements among cities of Magna Graecia and between Western cities and others, including native Italic tribes, were displayed at Olympia, such as a contract of around 510 concerning the city of Sybaris, which you see circled on the map, and the Cerdaeans. And here's that contract. The tie between Olympia and the West was so strong that it was embodied in myth told by ancient authors. Apollo, or a hunter, pursued the nymph Arethusa at Olympia. To evade her pursuer, she transformed into a spring, leapt into the Alpheus River at Olympia, and resurfaced as the freshwater spring Arethusa on the island of Ortygia at Syracuse on Sicily. This connection was trumpeted on 5th century BCE Syracusan coinage, first with the appearance of Alpheus on the left, then with the head of Arethusa on the right. In addition, Pindar claims that one of the 2 founders of the colony of Syracuse was a seer of the Iamadae family, the hereditary priests of the Oracle of Zeus at Olympia. Now to Delphi. At the Apollo Sanctuary at Delphi, Western Greek patrons include the cities of Taras, Croton, Metapontion, Sybaris, Rhegion, Syracuse, and Akragas, among others. The offerings celebrate athletic victories in the Pythian Games. I've already mentioned the charioteer of Delphi's group, as well as military victories, such as 2 sculptural monuments from Taras, and I show you one here, and you can see the actual base right here with an inscription on it. And on the right, you can see a reconstruction of the monument with the blocks here, 1, 2, and 3 in darker color. Those are the 3 blocks that have been put together on the left-hand side. so that the intervening blocks are not shown there, just the 3 blocks are on display. So we have one sculptural monument by Taras. There's a second one that is further down, closer to the start of the Sacred Way. We also have gold tripods and nikai dedicated by the 5th century Dinominid tyrants of Gela and Syracuse. And you see on the right, the actual bases of the monuments still there with the inscriptions on the bases. And then on the left, a reconstruction, including the bases. This pointer is lags behind a little bit. And then possible reconstructions of the nikai, here just a nikkei, and a tripod above, but there are scholars who believe that each of these 2 columns had tripods and nikai on them, so one of each item on them. And I also want to show you a detail of the leftmost base, so you can see the inscription on it, and Jalon's name is right at the beginning. Ancient authors record precious offerings from Polis of a chryselephantine statue of a river god given by Akragas, a gold celery plant from Selinus, and a golden harvest from Metapontion. We think it's a golden sheaf of wheat, and there's actually been a base with little holes in it for the wheat that has been found. And we also have golden strigils from Sybaris. To give some idea of the scale of some of these votives, we can cite the example of a military thank offering made by the Cnidians, see the map on the right, from their colony on the island of Lipara, indicated on the left map by the red arrow. This dedication consisted of 20 statues of Apollo on an inscribed marble base, and parts of that base are still remaining. The base, perhaps as long as 60 meters, was located atop the retaining wall for the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. So that's this white wall that you see right here above the Athenian treasury. Not all votives were civic dedications. The sophist, Gorgias of Leontini, erected a gilt bronze statue of himself near the altar to Apollo at Delphi, and a physician from Selinus dedicated a statue group of at least 2 figures, as we know from the inscribed base. Several Sicilians donated funds to reconstruct the Apollo temple at Delphi in the 4th century BCE, and among them is a woman from Selinus. Again, there is a concentration of material from the 6th to 4th centuries, but also more from the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. So what's missing in there is kind of the link between the 4th and 3rd centuries. Delphi's appeal may have been connected to its oracle's role in Greek colonization, including the establishment of the colonies of Croton, Rhegion, and Taras, and it is also understandable why Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries might attract the attention of Western Greeks. But these are not the only sites that elicited interest from this population. Epigraphical evidence indicates that Western Greeks won athletic and musical contests at Larissa, Orchomenos, the Amphioryon at Oropos, Tanagra, Mount Lycaon, all on mainland Greece, and also at the Heraion on Samos. Western Greeks also consulted the oracle at Dodona on the northwest Greek mainland. Again, geography and accessibility surely were instrumental. Polis in Magna Graecia made offerings on the mainland outside of Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries. For example, a 5th century BCE monument from Himera dedicated on the Athenian Acropolis, as known from the inscribed base, and a contribution of money from Taras listed in the inventory of the other gods in Attica of around 429 to 8 BCE. Further afield on the Aegean island of Delos, the cities of Tauromenion, Leontini, Naxos, Metapontion, and Taras made dedications, and individual Syracusans and Tarentines donated crowns and fialae. One Western Greek dedication on Delos is unusual in that it is from a family. The banker Heraclides from Taras, his wife from Syracuse, and their children made this offering. All of the activity on Delos is chiefly of the 2nd century BCE. And to round off this sampling of the evidence, Western Greeks also made their mark at sanctuaries on the far side of the Mediterranean. For example, private dedications at the Samian Heraion and at the Apollo sanctuary of Kaunos in Caria. And so I've marked Caria on the map for you and the island of Samos. And here, just some visual eye candy that's not a map. This is the sanctuary of Apollo at Kaunos. This is the theater there. And here a view of the Samian Heraion, of course. Inscriptions attest that this gift-giving was not one way. Rulers, individual citizens, and polis from Magna Graecia received benefits, both tangible and intangible, from sanctuaries in Athens, Oropos, on Delos, Delphi, Olympia, and the Asklepion at Eliros on Crete, among others. And these honors included public praise and civic and religious honors. Citizenship, for example, or proxenia. And for those who don't know what proxenia is, it's a compact of friendship between a state and an individual not living there. And that individual represents that state's interests or visitors in the individual's town. Other honors were promanteia, the right to consult the Delphic oracle first, ateleia, exemption from taxes, prodikeia, priority of trial, asilia, inviolability of person or property, and proedria, front seats at public spectacles, specifically the theater. Tangible benefits included gold crowns and honorific statues. Even further east, for example, the Asclepion on Kos, the Heraion on Samos, and the sanctuary of Apollo on Kalymnos, see the red arrow on the right, bestowed honors and privileges on Western Greek polis and individuals. An inscription attests that in 208 BCE, Syracuse accepted an invitation from Magnesia and requested Asilia to attend the Artemis Leucophryene festival, and in exchange gave honors to the presbautai, the ambassadors. The Asclepion on Kos commemorated their syngeneia, their kinship, with Camarina and Geloans living in ancient Phintius, which is west of Gela. It's the town now of Licata, in 242 BCE with grants of Asilia. And one last private example, in around 260 BCE, the sanctuary of Apollo on the island of Chaos, see the blue arrow on the right, awarded a crown and citizenship on Hieron of Syracuse, the son of Timocrates, who was an officer of Ptolemy. And there is still more, but I'm not going to tell you all of it. So what to do with all this evidence? My study employs network theory to disentangle the complex ties of Western Greek cities to various nodes, central locations that receive a lot of traffic, such as Delos in the Aegean, and to seek out how the polis form ties beyond these nodes. Network theory investigates the structural dynamics, the strength, direction, and influence of ties between actors in networks. An example of networks of theoroi, officials sent out by sanctuaries to announce festivals and games, and who traveled on fixed routes across the Mediterranean. These are literal networks of people moving from place to place. They came into contact with hundreds of other people, including individuals called theorodokoi, who were charged by the targeted cities to house and feed those visiting theoroi. Parallel to this were athletes and trainers traveling to various competitions at a great variety of locations, thus forming another network that intersects with that of the theoroi. Proxeny networks, athletic networks, trade networks, via large trading hubs, such as Corinth, and networks of religious officials are particularly promising sources of information. Diplomatic networks and networks of honors between West Greek polis and those back home, that are not concerned with sanctuaries are also of great importance. The island of Tinos, the Molossians in the northwest Greek mainland, Miletus and Kymi in Asia Minor, approximately where the Blue Arrow is, Thespiae, just west of Thebes, as well as Histiaea and Eretria on Euboea, bestowed honors on Western Greek individuals and cities. So these are not sanctuaries, these are just civic honors. Likewise, Western Greeks made diplomatic gifts in the other direction. The 2nd century BCE historian Polybius describes the extraordinary largesse that Hieron II of Syracuse and his son Jalon bestowed on Rhodes after the island suffered an earthquake in 227-226. A statue group of the Demos of Syracuse crowning that of Rhodes, 75 talents of silver, silver cauldrons and water vessels, money for sacrifices, money to attract new citizens after this earthquake, 100 talents for the gymnasion, 50 catapults to defend the cities, and asilia to Rhodian merchants traveling to ports under the control of these rulers. The intersections and multi-directional flows of activity between the nodes of apoikiai, the colonies, metropoles, the mother cities, sanctuaries, and other cities and rulers created a Mediterranean-wide interconnected web. Some of these networks have been mapped, while others have not, but can be reconstructed from ancient written sources, particularly inscriptions. By comparing these networks, places, persons, dates, and circumstances with the evidence for Western Greek activities and sanctuaries further east, I seek patterns and correlations in giving and receiving, choices of sanctuaries, which Western cities or individuals make dedications and receive or bestow honors, and what, when, and where they are. As a few examples, rulers make gifts at Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries or where there is a lot of international traffic. Is there any connection in the timing of these dedications and the locations where athletes from their cities have been victorious? Do Western Greeks favor only certain deities? Is there an alignment between sanctuaries receiving gifts from Western polis or rulers and when certain sanctuary officials hold office? Are West Greek dedications concentrated on sanctuaries near their trading hubs? Do Western polis tend to make gifts or dedications in response to gift giving by other specific polis, either as rivalry or in some cooperation? So I have a lot of work to do. Ethnicity is also a component of my study. Throughout this talk, I have referred to Western Greeks for the sake of convenience, as if this region signifies a collective identity, although the variety of their architecture and its painted and sculpted decoration alone makes it very clear that there were various regional and polis identities, or polis identities. Delphi is usually regarded as an Ionian sanctuary, while Olympia was regarded as Dorian, or is regarded as Dorian, a categorization made on the basis of the polis making dedications in the two sanctuaries. Does this generalization hold true for Western Greek colonies? And can we identify or not Dorian or Ionian networks? Think of athletes or pilgrims. Might the Western Greek connections with sanctuaries further east be characterized according to some other ethnicity or self-representation? For example, Hellenes, Western or Eastern Hellenes, non-Hellenes, colonial or urban. One goal of my work is to explore how these Greeks in Magna Graecia perceived of themselves as Hellenes, Western Hellenes, Sicilian, according to polis, by colony founder, Dorian or Ionian, a mixture of these, or none of these. Most scholars who consider such questions rely on ancient historical or literary texts to address these issues. But the ancient authors of such writings usually are not Western Greeks and often are composing long after the events in question. It is also unclear to what extent the views expressed by any given author are representative, or to what degree they accord with reality, as opposed to ideology. The fact that colonial Greeks competed in religious games at pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, erected buildings in the same, and worshiped the same deities certainly reifies their Hellene status. But can we go beyond that? Important testimony in this respect comes from the inscribed bronze plaque at Olympia that identified a statue, perhaps that seen by Pausanias, of the mid-5th century BCE victor in the Dolachos race at Olympia, Ergateles of Himera. He was a multiple winner in the Pan-Hellenic Games, who was celebrated in Pindar's 12th Olympian victory ode. If the restoration of the inscription is correct, and most epigraphers seem to agree on this, the athlete declares himself victorious over Greeks, Hellenos Nikon, not the other Greeks, but over Greeks. One might interpret this to mean that he was victorious over all the other Greeks, and this may be the case, since by the time of this Olympic victory, Ergateles had already been twice victorious in the other 3 crown games. But if taken as it is written, in other words, victorious over Greeks, it may be that Ergateles viewed himself as non-Greek. Why name your opponents as Hellenes in the 5th century Olympic Games? For who else would they be? Indeed, Pausanias tells us that he was earlier exiled from Knossos, but the hometown named here is Himera on Sicily. If Ergateles opposes himself to the Greeks, then he sees the competition as between peoples, or at least various kinds of Greeks, Greeks from over there and not his Greeks, not as, or not only as, a competition between individuals, thus more akin to the modern-day Olympics with its emphasis on nationalism. This may be an individual case, but it is the rare declaration from a Western Greek speaking for himself in a pan-Hellenic setting. We might also ask if self-identifications changed over generations as newcomer colonists became long-term permanent residents. Let us consider the inscribed 5th century dedication of the 20 statues of Apollo at Delphi, which I briefly mentioned earlier. The base was inscribed twice, then reinscribed, and finally reused for a dedication by the 2nd century CE Roman Emperor Commodus. The original donors were from a colony of Cnidians living on the small island of Lipari in the Aeolian Sea just north of Sicily. The 5th century inscription reads, "The Cnidians of Lipara, having captured 20 ships from the Tyrrhenians, the Etruscans, dedicated this in thanksgiving to the Pythian god, Apollo." Here at Delphi, as Claude Vatin points out, these colonists from Lipari do not present themselves as Liparian, but Cnidian. When the base was reinscribed toward the end of the 4th century BCE, there is no mention of Cnidos at all. We simply have the Liparians taken from the Tyrrhenians. By contrast, Pausanias remarks on 2 statue groups erected at Olympia by Formus, who worked for the tyrant Jalon of Syracuse. Formus originally hailed from Menelaus in Arcadia. If we can trust Pausanias on the accuracy of the inscription on the dedication, it reads, Formus, dedicated me, an Arcadian of Menelaus, now of Syracuse. Here, Formus records both his hometown and his adopted home on Sicily in that order. Whereas the inscribed sculptural monument erected around 480 at Olympia by one Praxiteles, not the sculptor, declares that Praxiteles of Syracuse and Camarina set up this agalma, formerly from Mantinea, thus inverting the order. His adopted cities now come first. To conclude, most scholarship proceeds from a viewpoint centered on the Greek mainland, with the Western colonies at the periphery. I would like to shift that viewpoint to the West, to place Magna Graecia at the center of the map, and to consider the world of Aegean sanctuaries from this perspective. By illuminating the complex religious and patronage networks that crisscross the ancient Mediterranean, I wish to bring together two areas, Western Greece and the rest of Greece, that are usually treated distinctly by scholars who specialize in one geographical area or the other. Rather than viewing these areas and others like them, such as the Greek colonies in the Black Sea region or parts of Asia Minor, as peripheral, one must understand them as integral components in a large network, not only the small island network of Greece as described by Irad Malkin. The question of how immigrants, forced or voluntary, regarded and maintained religious connections to their home culture has never seemed more timely. Ευχαριστώ.
No, you should stay up here if you're willing to take questions. Sure. Okay. You could sit here.
We'll stand. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Harlow. I'm the director of the Institute of Classical Studies here from London, as you've heard. It's wonderful to be here. And it's been absolutely fantastic to have Judy's lecture with this amazing presentation of the evidence of Western Greeks and their interaction with sites on the mainland and in Asia Minor as well. You're willing to take questions, which is fantastic. And I think Mirina and Christy are going to go around with microphones. Is that okay, Christy? Oh, Rebecca, please.
If it's not too, I don't know, selfish. Thank you so much, Judy. That was fantastic. And I couldn't keep up with all my note taking, so I'm going to have to quiz you in much more detail tomorrow morning at breakfast. I would like, so you hinted, I mean, I'd already a question about this, and then you started hinting at different kinds of potential relationships. So say, one city with Delphi, because it may have been that that city was founded because of an oracle from Delphi or whatever it might have been. And then you listed all these different kinds of relationships, but I wanted to know if you could give us a sneak preview of whether you found any evidence to suggest that there are particular relationships on the basis of epigraphic data or dedications that you find. And don't say no.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that interesting question. How long can I prolong this kind of preview or this preliminary remarks? Because that is what I have yet to do. So I've collected all this evidence, and I'm still collecting evidence. I've been working on this project for 2 years now, and I have some preliminary thoughts, but I'm not so keen to share them yet because I really haven't tested these ideas yet. But it's clear, I mean, it's clear that there are certain places that are highlighted by these Western Greek cities, that they're really interested in being where the action is, but also the reach of these things has astonished me. And it's the Asia Minor material right now, which I'm kind of exploring because I never expected to find these connections, which I've found there. But I do think, I mean, some of it clearly is connections from the founders of these colonies. Yeah. So Rhodes and its connections with various colonies that they found in South Italy and Sicily. So, for example, the Lindian Chronicle, which of course was not composed until 99 BC and seems to be a fiction, but the claims made in that are interesting because these are about connections with cities, some cities, not entirely, in Western Greece, and claims that they're making to be really close with these cities. So there's political motivation there. And so I think that in some cases, this is about the contacts have to do with earlier connections, not necessarily the metropoles, because in fact, the colonies tend to avoid making gifts to sanctuaries in the metropolis. That's really interesting. But the honors bestowed by certain sanctuaries tend to go to some of these colonies. You're welcome. A lot of it is epigraphical. I'm not an epigrapher, but I'm learning a lot.
I also had a question which was slightly inviting you to anticipate things that you haven't analysed yet. But I mean, because you've obviously got an incredibly rich data set that you're collecting. And do you have a hunch that we will find that different sanctuaries become more important and less important over time? Or do you think there's quite a lot of stability in terms of which cities relate to which sanctuaries?
I think you're exactly right to raise this point, because certain sanctuaries definitely kind of go out of fashion. Olympia is one that seems to be not so populated after the 4th century BC. But this is true actually about Olympia in general in terms of these dedications from cities. What we tend to, big monuments, what we tend to see later in the 4th century and onward are honorific statues. And yeah, they're given by cities, but they tend to have very close connections to Olympia. And I think certainly Delos, of course, this is the 2nd century material, and that comes to the fore, and then this all comes to a crash in the 1st century BC. But Magnesia, these sanctuaries, the Asia Minor sanctuaries, seem to come in only in the 3rd century.
Over there, yeah.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
perfect. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk. In the spirit of centering Magna Grecia, I'm wondering, so like, if we think about the way that the coastal cities face, like inland versus towards the sea, sanctuaries are also playing this critical role in creating networks in between the polis and the various kinds of Italic peoples in this area. And I'm curious if you're seeing any overlap and interaction between the networks that are like the sanctuary networks that are existing in Italy and the ones that are kind of connecting these cities with the broader Aegean. So like when the Tarentines are dedicating the Victory Monument at Delphi over the Peucatians, what role do the Peucatians have in this whole thing?
Yeah, it's a really complex question that you're asking, and one that I'm trying not to get too tangled into because this is already overwhelming in terms of scale. But yeah, I'm really actually interested in some of the interconnections, certainly with the Etruscans. This is really important. And with Phoenicians, the Peucatians, I don't have a lot of knowledge about yet, but this is coming. So I know this is very disappointing. I'm not giving you lots of juicy information in this question session because I'm still at too early a stage to answer all of these questions. But some of this I'll touch on, but I'm kind of creating boundaries in my reach at this point because investigating all of these networks, for example, pilgrims and athletes and so forth, and administrators in these sanctuaries is going to keep me busy maybe until I die. Which of course we don't know when that is, but
Hello. I hope I'm audible. Thank you.
you're audible. Hi, Supreet.
Hello. Thank you for the lecture. I had a question on the on the theology, which the heralders of religious events. Okay. You mentioned that the cities were informed of these like religious festivals. Like Olympia was in Asia Minor. It's the good example. Would other competing cities, for example, Syracuse would, let's say, would compete with Gela or with Akragas, would they, sensing an opportunity of these theoroi, either try to impede their transfer to this home city, the Ionian and Doric city in Sicily, or would they outcompete them at their hometown? Like go to Olympia, an Ionian city, and just give a bigger statue group. How would the policy of the merchants or the religious officials work in this case?
Okay, wait, I missed the first part of this about the theoroi. What were you asking about the theoroi?
The theoroi are, as far as I understood, people who, religious officials who go to bring announcement to the city that the festival is happening.
Mhm.
So would cities, other competing cities of in Sicily, because there's a lot of competition as far as I have read, would they try to impede or would they try to outperform their competitors because of this competition?
Sanctuaries
As an arena of competition. Yeah. I'm not sure of the answer to that question yet. And the theoroi, this, because my focus has been thus far on these contacts overseas. But the first part of this project, the first part of the book that I will be writing sometime about this is about the homeland sanctuaries on Sicily. So a lot of the sanctuaries that exist on Sicily and in South Italy that were founded by these colonial Greeks are, many of them are Demeter sanctuaries. There's a duplication of things that are happening on the mainland. For example, the Olympic Games are instituted in various of these sanctuaries to Zeus in Sicily and South Italy. So they create their own Olympic Games. So the competition seems less between the cities, so far as I can tell thus far, less between the cities in these colonial places and more with things on the mainland. And as if they're trying to bid for attention and getting it and creating arenas for people to come and visit there and for athletes to come to them.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much, Professor, for the paper. I was wondering whether it would be helpful to compare Magna Graecia to other regions situated in the periphery of the Greek world, like Macedon or Cyprus. So in this context, within this context, we do have rulers like Archaeology or Philip or Eubagoras, the king Eubagoras of Cyprus, who do foster links with what we understand as the Greek mainland, as the Greek center, thus blurring the picture and leading us to believe that their whole communities subscribed to this agenda. So in the case of Italy, could it be that the case that there were rulers, tyrants like Dionysius, or some sort of elite who wanted to present this facade of Hellenism? Because it's quite known that it is the elite and the tyrants who are present in the big sanctuaries in mainland Greece, whereas the communities tend to be more silent in this regard.
Thank you for the question. That you are quite right that rulers and the elite are very prominent in these Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, and not only the Western Greeks, but Macedon and Cyprus as well. But I would also like to emphasize that individual citizens are also people we've never heard of otherwise, are also making these dedications. And this, I think, is really important and neglected information, neglected material, because we tend to focus on the big names, this kind of thing. But in fact, I am planning, one chapter of the book will be a comparison of these Western Greek colonies with the Black Sea colonies, to have some kind of control, to see just how unusual or how special the Western Greek presence is in these sanctuaries, to compare it to another Greek colonial area Cyprus is a possibility, but this is also a different culture. And so I'm a little reluctant to go there. And Macedon, we could argue it lies somewhere between those two things, between Greeks and a foreign culture. But certainly Black Sea area, I think, is very useful and possible. This is why I mentioned this right at the end. Possibly locations in Asia Minor, Greek locations in Asia Minor, although opening up Asia Minor that's a really big Pandora's box. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Once again, thank you for this interesting talk.
You're very welcome.
All this rich evidence, and you will collect more evidence, I think. I was wondering if a chronological classification of this evidence can show us different things. Can you observe a concentration of contacts between specific places at certain times, and why, if you have an answer, why this concentration? And are you able to say whether concentration of contacts in specific times means specific networks, different sorts of networks?
Thank you. This is precisely why in each of these sanctuaries, the Delphi and Olympia, and at Delos, I mentioned where the concentrations of evidence are, because I am keeping an eye on this. So 5th and 4th centuries are the big areas for Delphi and Olympia, and this is hardly surprising because of these rulers, and they tend to dominate the scene. And also we have lots and lots of military victory monuments celebrating various victories, not only over the Persians or Phoenicians, but also over each other's, Western Greek cities over each other, which is really interesting that they choose to do this at Delphi, or they choose to dedicate Etruscan armor at Olympia, right? They're not doing it at their home sanctuaries, they're doing it at these sanctuaries. So I think that may explain why we have lots of action in the 5th and 4th centuries. And then for Delos, the information is almost entirely from the 2nd century BC, which I guess this is Delos's boomtown, so who's surprised at that? But we don't have stuff, material from Delos earlier, which is also intriguing, because Delos didn't suddenly develop out of nothing in the 2nd century BC. There was a sanctuary there for many, many, many centuries before that. And so they're gravitating towards these big centers, but then we have the Samian Harayan, and of course, that's a huge sanctuary, but the big pool of material that's coming in to the Samian Harayan tends to be Eastern, in Asia Minor, and even from foreign cultures in the East. And yet we still have material from individuals at the Harayan, and also we have an honorific inscription from the Samian Harayan to this individual in the West. I can't remember exactly the city it's from. It doesn't matter at this point. But these tend to be late. The connections with the Samian Harayan also tend to be late. So the Eastern Aegean seems to get later attention from the Western Greeks, as if they're kind of moving across the Aegean. But I think it's also has to do with changes in government and changes in trade patterns. That can account for this, as Hellenistic Rhodes, for example, becomes not a point of contact with the West, but in the Hellenistic period, but this becomes a huge trade hub and kind of bringing everything into its orbit. And there's so much traffic around there coming from absolutely everywhere. So this may be the reason, but this sounds all rather banal and kind of amorphous at this point, but this is what I'm concluding from what I've got thus far.
Oh, thanks as always for a wonderful talk. And I'm asking this question out of some ignorance, but in response to your creating dialogues and energies and thinking about centers and periphery, how interested were Western Greeks in each other? I mean, that is, can you, we were talking about various sanctuaries of Demeter. Can you find dedications from one city to another? Are they in extensive communication with each other? And how does that compare with the scale and the quality or the content of things that they decide to communicate abroad?
Thank you, Bana. Certainly, they're interested in each other in all kinds of ways, mostly in conquering each other and in killing each other. But in terms of sanctuaries, they do make dedications at neighboring sanctuaries and at sanctuaries further afield. And they also receive offerings, I know this, from Etruscans and some of the native tribes as well. So recent work by Creeland has shown a lot of activity in certain locations from native tribes and giving offerings at the Greek sanctuaries there in ways that you wouldn't expect. They tend to be quite modest in the gifts that they're making. So the big splashy things are for abroad, but we do have the dedications. Yeah. You're welcome.
Have time for one more question. If anyone has a burning question they'd like to ask. In that case, we will wait for the further development of this work and look forward to further talks on the work in progress and the eventual book. It's been a absolutely fantastic lecture. Thank you for your talk, Judy. Really engaging. I've learned a lot from it. So can we please thank Judy again for her? Thank you. I'm also a guest in this building, obviously, but I would also like to thank Professor Papazakadis and also Professor Sweetman, the hosts. I'd like to thank Mirina and Christy, and I believe it falls to me to invite you, it seems very strange because I'm not the host, to the reception next door. Please join us. Really enabling. It's very much in a way a much more fine brand of what's going on. And it's just questions like